Hey guys, today we're going to go through our very last scene of Romeo and Juliet. This is Act 5, Scene 3. But before we start, let's go over what we read in our last scene. Poor Romeo thinks he's still going to get his happily ever after. He has a dream, in fact, that he dies, but Juliet revives him with a kiss and he becomes an emperor. That's very short-lived because Balthazar comes in and tells him that, as fate would have it, he was going by the cemetery and saw Juliet's funeral. Romeo realizes that he has no chance of his happy ending after all, and he decides to race back to to Verona to die next to Juliet's side. He remembers the apothecary shop, and he gets the poison from the apothecary, and now we know how he's going to do it. In our last scene before this reading, Friar Lawrence finds out why his letter was never delivered to Romeo. And remember, that's because Friar John, one of Friar Lawrence's friends, friend pastor, was going to deliver the message. He wanted to road trip with another pastor. He stopped to pick him up to go. He was visiting the sick, and as fate would have it, they were put under quarantine, and they wouldn't even let the letter out of the house. So it was returned to Friar Lawrence, and Friar Lawrence realizes, oh my gosh, this could not go worse. So, as we said, all roads were leading to the cemetery because Romeo was heading there to kill himself, and Friar Lawrence was heading there to rescue Juliet. And as we start our scene today, we see that the other folks are going to be there. In fact, that's where the culmination of our play will occur. So as we start Act 5, Scene 3, Paris is at the cemetery. Poor awkward Paris. He had his one chance at happiness, and he's at Juliet's grave putting flowers there. And in fact, he says he'll come every night for the rest of his life to put flowers on her tomb. He has a servant with him, and as he's at Juliet's grave, he says, "Whistle to me if anybody else is approaching." Not sure why, because it's totally fine for him to be there, but he probably has some kind of an idea that something might be going on. So as he is talking to Juliet and he's acting like he's going to water the graveyard with his tears nightly, he hears a whistle, signifying that somebody is indeed coming. So he hides in the bushes. The someone who's coming, of course, is Romeo and Balthazar, the servant who came to tell him that Juliet was dead. So Romeo takes the crowbar. He goes to break into Juliet's tomb. He gives a letter to Balthazar. This letter is going to come up later. This letter is going to explain everything that's happened up to this point. And Balthazar is going to have this letter to give it to Romeo's parents. So he tries to make an excuse to Balthazar because, of course, you don't want somebody to know you're going to kill yourself because people are going to try to stop you, including your servants. So he tries to make up some excuse that the reason I'm breaking in here is because I want to get a ring back. A little creepy, getting a ring from the corpse. And he even kind of threatens him. He says, if you stay and bother me, I will tear you apart and strew the graveyard with your limbs. Balthazar says, I'll be gone and I won't bother you, but still he kind of hides off in the bushes because he is really suspicious about what's going on. So we have all this stuff going on, people hiding in the bushes. Romeo goes up and he gives a speech, "Thou detestable maw, thou womb of death, gorged with the dearest morsel of the earth, thus I enforce thy rotten jaws to open, and in despite I'll cram thee with more food," saying, I'm going to go in and join you. He compares it to a mouth being stuffed with food. Now Paris, remember, is in the bushes, and he sees what's happening, and he's going to have all sorts of strange ideas about that. He says to himself, hey, this is that Montague that is responsible for Juliet's death, because they think she killed herself over being so distraught over Tybalt's death So that's why he's blaming Romeo. That's probably what the whole Capulet family thought. So he decides he's going to make a citizen's arrest. He pops out of the bushes and tells Romeo to stop, and gives him kind of a little speech about, are you kidding me? Messing with dead people? That's pretty low. Romeo tries to get him to kind of back off. This is kind of similar to the speech that he gave to Tybalt when he was all sorts of awkwardly saying, look, I can't tell you why, but you just need to trust me, etc. He's trying to do that to Paris as well, saying, back off, I don't mean any harm, you just have to trust me. Remember, that's ineffective communication, trying to tell somebody that is your enemy, somebody that you don't trust, to trust you. So Paris says, nope, not buying it, and I'm going to arrest you right here. Romeo says, well, then bring it. And they have a big sword fight, and Paris is slain. I guess when you're a toad, you can't fight that well. So he starts to die, and Romeo then realizes who he is. He did hear from probably Balthazar when they were riding back to town that Juliet had been promised to Paris, and that they were going to try to go through this marriage. And he got that piece of information. He goes into the tomb then, and he talks to Tybalt for a minute, because remember, they did not put the bodies in coffins. They would be just covered with a sheet, laying on like a slab. And so he would be able to see Tybalt there, and he tells him, the person who killed you is going to join you in death here. He turns to Juliet, and he says, death that has sucked the honey of thy beauty hath had no power yet. Thou art not conquered, beauty's ensign yet is crimson in your lips and your cheeks, and death's pale flag is not advanced here. Why is this important? He's commenting on the color she has in her cheeks and in her lips. Now, we know that Friar said, when you take this potion, you're going to be really pale. Remember, Lord Capulet, when he saw Juliet's body, talked about how pale she was. So this is where the audience learns, wait, her lips and cheeks are starting to get rosy? She's waking up. And the audience would probably be like, wake up already, before Romeo is finished with what he's doing. Romeo talks a little bit more. He has kind of like Mercutio, kind of a long death speech here. And then he says, talking to Juliet and himself, eyes look your last, arms take your last embrace, and lips owe you the doors of breath, seal with a righteous kiss, a dateless bargain to engrossing death. Then he takes the poison, and he says, come bitter conduct, come unsavory guide, thou desperate pilot, now at once run on the dashing rocks, thy seasick weary bark, here's to my love. He makes a toast to Juliet, he knocks back the poison, and then he says, O true apothecary, thy drugs are quick, thus with a kiss I die. So he literally kisses her, falls over, snap, he's gone. Now, in most versions of this story, while he's doing this, we have other clues that Juliet is waking up as well. We have maybe her fingers start to twitch, or maybe her arm move a little bit, again, letting the audience know she's this close. We cut to another scene really quickly, though, before Juliet fully does wake up. In fact, in one scene, though, Juliet does start to open her eyes right after he's drank the potion. So Romeo sees her laying there with open eyes, but it's too late. And possibly he thinks that he's just imagining it because he knows he's going to join her anyway. Friar Lawrence comes rushing to the graveyard. As fate would have it, too late, because it's literally right after Romeo drank the poison and fell over. He goes in, to the tomb after seeing Thor. Shh. See, he's pretty upset about this too. He sees corpses, he sees bloody swords, etc. And Balthazar tells him, well, Romeo just went in there. He's been in there just for a little bit. So Friar Lawrence goes running into the tomb, and he sees Romeo dead. He sees Paris dead, and then Juliet starts to wake up. Thor, seriously. When Juliet wakes up, she says, "O comfortable friar, where is my lord? I do remember well where I should be, and there I am. Where's my Romeo?" He tries to pull her away. He says, "Look, I hear some noise outside. Let's get out of here. What I'm going to do is take you back home. I'm going to hide you out in a convent with a bunch of nuns, and then we'll take it from there." He hears a noise outside, and he says, "I need to go." So he runs out the door. Now, in my opinion, that's one of the biggest mistakes that could possibly happen here. To leave a teenage girl in a tomb with her dead husband right there, he kind of blew it. I know that he bolted because he was afraid of the noises he heard and the watchman coming, etc. But he should have insisted that she comes along. So she does see Romeo's body dead, and she says, "What's here? A cup closed in my true love's hand. Poison I see hath been his timeless end." She tries to drink the poison, but she realizes there's none left, and she says, "O churl, drunk all and left no friendly drop to help me after." She kisses his lips to see if there's any poison left on them. There's not. She comments on his lips are warm, signifying that he literally, as fate would have it, had just died. And then that's when she realizes, what's this? It's the happy dagger. So she grabs it. She says, "Oh, happy dagger." She shanks herself. She says, "This is thy sheath. There rust and let me die." And she falls over dead. That's when everybody starts to descend upon the graveyard. Okay? A bunch of watchmen from the cemetery, the Capulets, the Montagues. Apparently, words started spreading around pretty quickly around town. Something's happening at the cemetery. So the Capulets come in first, and they're freaking out. They're like, "What's going on?" People are running through the street crying Romeo, and some calling Juliet, and some talking about Paris. So as they go to the tomb, they see Juliet, and they realize that she is just newly dead because she's bleeding. She was not stabbed before. They thought she poisoned herself. And she still looks fairly warm, like she had just died recently. Lord Montague comes in, and he comments, because the prince is there as well, he comments to the prince that his wife had died the evening before. She was so distraught over Romeo's exile that she died. We don't know if she died of a broken heart, if she killed herself, whatever, but she is another one to add to the corpse count. So the prince is really confused about what's going on, and he's asking everybody, who knows what's going on here? And Friar Lawrence had been detained by one of the watchmen, and he comes forward, and kind of ironically, he says, "I will be brief." And then he goes through and tells you the whole story pretty much from the beginning of the play. That he married them, there was the whole problem with Tybalt, then Romeo being banished, and then he tried these other plans, but they wouldn't work, and then Lord Capulet insisted on Juliet getting married to somebody else, so he tried to fake her death, etc., etc. He goes through the entire story. At the end, he says, "Let my old life be sacrificed some hour before his time unto the rigor of Severe's law." So he pretty much confesses and says, This is my fault. Punish me if you need be. The prince says, we still have known thee for a holy man. And then he calls for the servant, Balthazar, and he says, what do you have to say about this? Well, luckily, remember, Romeo gave Balthazar a letter explaining what had happened. This was kind of Romeo's suicide note to give to the dad, but Balthazar still had it. So the prince took the letter and read through it, and it talked about him buying the poison and him coming back to kill himself at Juliet's side. Romeo's dead, Juliet's dead, Paris is dead, Lady Montague's dead in this final scene. The prince says that Capulet and Montague are to blame. He says, see what a scourge is laid upon your hate, that heaven finds means to kill your joys with love. The irony of Romeo and Juliet's love, killing their joy by taking their kids away from them. But then he also blames himself. He says, and I, for winking at your discords too, have lost a brace of kinsmen, all are punished. Paris is related to Mercutio. Mercutio is related to the prince, so he has lost 2 of his family in this process. That's when Capulet reaches out to Montague and says, give me your hand. What I'm going to do is honor you. And Montague says, I will do the same. I'm going to raise a statue to Juliet in pure gold, that while Verona stands, her statue will be there for eternity. Or Capulet says, I will do the same to Romeo. And in fact, guys, Verona's a real city in Italy. If you have a chance, you can go visit it. I did a couple of summers ago. You would think that the English teacher would be the most excited by that, and yet I really wasn't. But they do have statues of Romeo and Juliet there that you can see to this day. So get the irony there, just as predicted at the beginning of the play, or told, not just predicted, that it would take Romeo and Juliet's deaths to end the feud. The feud has now ended. So our play ends with the prince saying these lines. Thor, can I have a minute, please? Thor. Thank you. He's probably not going to give me a minute. He says, a glooming peace this morning with it brings. The sun for sorrow will not show his head. Go hence to have more talk of these sad things. Some shall be pardoned, and some punished. For never was there a story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo. And that's end scene. When the audience would see this for the first time, remember they knew the story, they just didn't know how it was going to flesh out. They would probably sit there in shock. In fact, there's one version, a movie version of this, that it shows it on stage. And literally when the scene ends, the audience is sitting there in shock for a little while before they start to applaud. Because they're like, what did we just watch? And that's the end. So remember, guys, we talked about the whole 13 Reasons Why thing. There are so many people in this play to blame for Romeo and Juliet's death. Fate is like a character that pushes them, ruins their plans, messes with them. We have the parents, the Capulets and the Montagues both were not the best of parents. Obviously, Montagues were a little better, but they didn't do follow-up, remember, and the Capulets were just horrible, wretched parents. We have the nurse, who when Juliet needed her the most, just dropped the ball. We have Benvolio and Mercutio, who were pushing him to go to this party and meet somebody else, and in doing so, trying to get him over Rosalind, led to him meeting Juliet, which we know ended badly. We have the friar. Friar Lawrence meant well, but he was kind of in it deep from the beginning, and he is to blame quite a bit. In fact, there are whole articles written on how he alone caused Romeo and Juliet's death. The other viewpoint, guys, obviously Romeo and Juliet themselves. When somebody kills themselves, the bottom line is they do it. It's their choice. Even if other things happen in their life to push them in that direction, they had the final say. They made the final action. So think about who is the most to blame. Who would get the #1 tape in the 13 Reasons Why? Who was the most to blame? Okay? We will do a little bit more work with Romeo and Juliet next week as well. And then I will talk to you about our final exam on this. So take care. Remember, you are blessed to be a blessing. Street money out.